I need to tell you something before we go any further. You should stop listening now. I'm not saying that to be dramatic. I'm not trying to hook you with some cheap trick. I'm telling you this because once you hear what happened to me in those woods, once you really understand what followed me back, something changes. It's like opening a door in your mind that won't quite close again. You'll notice the hunger differently, the way it sits in your stomach between meals, the way silence feels when you're alone at night. The thing is, I think it knows when people hear about it. I think stories feed it somehow. Every time someone listens, really listens, they're sending out a signal into that dark forest, and maybe, just maybe, it turns its head their way. But you're still here. You're still listening. So am I. My name is Marcus Webb. I'm 42 years old. I've worked for the National Forest Service for 18 years, mostly doing wildlife population surveys in remote areas across the northern United States and southern Canada. I'm telling you this because I need you to understand something crucial. I'm not some weekend hiker who got lost on a marked trail. I'm not a city person who wandered into the woods unprepared. I've spent more nights under forest canopy than in my own bed. I know how to navigate by stars and moss. I know which mushrooms will feed you and which will shut down your kidneys. I know the difference between wolf tracks and coyote, between a bear's territory marking and a mountain lion scratch post. I knew the wilderness, or I thought I did. Before everything happened, my life had a comfortable rhythm. I'd spend 3 weeks in the backcountry, then 1 week in my apartment in Duluth, filing reports and restocking supplies. My ex-wife used to say I was more comfortable with trees and people, and she wasn't wrong. After the divorce, there was even less reason to stay in civilization. My daughter was away at college. My friends were mostly colleagues who understood the work. The forest was where I felt most myself. The assignment came through in early February. A routine survey in the boreal forest of northern Minnesota near the Canadian border. The area was so remote it didn't even have a proper name on most maps, just geographical coordinates and a designation Unincorporated Territory 7. The goal was to document wolf pack movements and check on the moose population, which had been declining for years. 3 weeks alone. Standard procedure. I'd done this exact work dozens of times. I packed my gear with the same methodical attention I always did. Tent rated for -40. Sleeping bag stuffed with premium down. Camp stove with 3 weeks of fuel canisters. Freeze-dried meals, energy bars, jerky, dried fruit, oatmeal, coffee, salt, sugar. Water filtration system. First aid kit with everything from bandages to antibiotics. Satellite phone for emergencies. Flare gun. Hunting knife. Bear spray. I carried a rifle too, a Remington 700 in 30-06, not because I expected to use it, but because in true wilderness, you carry the means to protect yourself. I knew every item in my pack. I knew its weight and purpose. I was prepared. The last person I spoke to face-to-face was a man named Dale Kowalski. He ran the small outfitter station in a town called Vermilion Crossing, population 86. Dale was Ojibwe, maybe 60 years old, with hands like carved wood and eyes that had seen more winters than most trees. He helped me load my gear into the truck that would take me to the trailhead. The sky was that particular shade of white-gray that means serious cold, and our breath hung in the air like something solid. 3 weeks out to Sector 7? Dale asked, though he already knew the answer. That's right. He was quiet for a moment, checking the straps on my pack. Then he said very casually, "You know it's a hungry time of year out there." "Always as in winter," I said. "That's why the moose are dying. Not enough browse." "That's one kind of hunger," Dale said. I looked at him. He was tying a knot with complete focus, not meeting my eyes. "You try and tell me something, Dale." He finished the knot, tested it. Then he finally looked at me. "My grandfather told me stories about that area. Said some parts of the forest remember things. Old things. Said there are places where winter never really ends. Not in the way that matters." He reached into his coat and pulled out a small cloth bundle tied with leather cord. "Tobacco and sage. You don't have to believe in it. Just take it." I took it because refusing would have been rude, and because Dale had always been good to me, but I didn't believe in it. I believed in preparation, in skill, in respecting the power of nature without mystifying it. "I'll be fine," I said. "Done this 100 times." Dale nodded slowly. "Sure you have. Just remember, if you start feeling hungrier than you should, even after eating, if food stops tasting right, if you hear something moving parallel to you but never see it." He paused. "Come back early. Don't wait to understand why. I'll keep that in mind." He looked at me for a long moment, and I saw something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Pity, maybe, or recognition of something inevitable. "Good luck out there, Marcus." I shook his hand and climbed into the truck. The driver was a kid named Jesse who didn't talk much, which was fine by me. We drove for 2 hours on progressively worse roads, from paved highway to gravel to dirt to something that was barely a logging trail. The forest pressing on both sides, dense stands of black spruce and jack pine, skeletal birch trees white as bone against the darker evergreens. Snow covered everything, smooth and unmarked except for the occasional track of a snowshoe hare or the excavated crater where a moose had dug for frozen sedges. The temperature on the truck's dashboard read -18 Fahrenheit, without wind chill. We reached the trailhead just before noon. Jesse helped me unload, accepted the cash tip and nod, and drove away without ceremony. I watched the truck disappear back down the trail, listened to the engine fade, and then there was only the sound of wind moving through pine needles and the subtle creaking of cold wood. I was alone. This was the part one usually loved. The moment when civilization's noise finally stopped and the forest's deeper quiet began. The sense of crossing a threshold into a place where human concerns didn't matter, where you were just another animal trying to survive. I adjusted my pack, checked my compass, and started walking. The plan was simple. Hike 12 miles deeper into forest to a lake marked on my map as Whitefish Lake, though I doubted any fish had lived there for decades. Set up a base camp. Spend 3 weeks doing radiating surveys in different directions, documenting tracks, scat, kill sites, anything that told the story of the ecosystem. Then hike back out. The first day was pure physical work. Breaking trail through snow that varied from ankle-deep powder to thigh-deep drifts. The forest was old growth, never logged, and moving through it required constant navigation around fallen trees and dense undergrowth. My breath came hard and steady. Sweat soaked the layers against my skin, despite the cold. This was familiar. This was good. I made camp that first night beside a frozen stream, set up the tent, got the stove going, made coffee and rehydrated a beef stew. The food was hot and salty and tasted perfect the way food always does when you've worked hard in the cold. I ate slowly, savoring every bite, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. After dinner, I sat outside the tent for a while, just listening. This was my meditation. In the forest at night, you could hear the whole conversation of life if you paid attention. The soft whump of snow falling from an overburdened branch, the distant call of a great gray owl, the rustle of some small mammal moving under the snow in those tunnels they make between the ground and the white surface. Everything sounded normal. I slept well that first night, the kind of deep sleep you only get after physical exhaustion in clean air. The second day was more the same. Steady hiking, beautiful scenery. I saw tracks, lots of tracks. Snowshoe hare, red squirrel, pine marten, wolf, moose, even a lynx trail that I followed for half a mile before it disappeared into dense cedar swamp. This was exactly what I'd come for. The forest was alive and functioning. I took photos, made notes, collected scat samples in plastic bags. Normal work, normal forest. I reached Whitefish Lake just before sunset on the second day. It was bigger than I'd expected, maybe 2 miles long, completely frozen, snow-covered, surrounded by thick forest on all sides. There was a small point of land jutting out into the lake, elevated slightly, with good drainage and protection from the north wind. Perfect for a base camp. I set up properly this time, dug out a flat platform for the tent, built a fire ring with stones cleared from the snow, strung a bear bag line between 2 trees, though I doubted any bears were awake this time of year, organized my gear, made camp feel like home. That night, I made a proper fire, not just a camp stove, and cooked a freeze-dried lasagna that I'd been saving. I sat close to the flames, feeling the heat on my face, watching sparks rise into the darkness. The sky was perfectly clear, and the stars were so bright and numerous they looked like snow themselves. I felt good, accomplished, exactly where I was supposed to be. I radioed in on the satellite phone. Brief check-in with the ranger station. Everything nominal. I'd check in again in 1 week, unless there was an emergency. That was my last normal night. The change started so subtly I almost didn't notice it. I woke up the third morning feeling hungry. Not unusually hungry. Just a normal appetite you'd expect after sleeping in the cold. I made my standard breakfast. Instant oatmeal with dried cranberries, instant coffee, a protein bar. Filling. Enough calories to fuel a day of work. But an hour later, hiking out from camp to survey the west side of the lake, I felt hungry again. Not starving. Just that nagging emptiness in your stomach that says you should eat something. I told myself it was just the cold. Your body burns more calories maintaining temperature. I ate another protein bar and kept working. By midday, I was genuinely hungry. The kind of hunger that makes you think about food more than you should. I stopped for lunch, made hot soup, ate a full meal, drank plenty of water to make sure I wasn't mistaking thirst for hunger. The feeling didn't go away. That afternoon, I kept reaching for snacks. I went through 3 protein bars and a bag of trail mix, and I still felt like I hadn't eaten. It was annoying more than concerning. Maybe I was burning more calories than usual. Maybe I'd miscalculated my food supply. I made a mental note to ration more carefully. That evening, I cooked a huge dinner. 2 freeze-dried meals instead of 1. I ate until I felt physically full, that uncomfortable tightness in your stomach. 20 minutes later, I was hungry again. I sat by the fire, feeling disturbed in a way I couldn't articulate. The hunger wasn't painful. It wasn't even that intense. But it was persistent, nagging, like a voice in the back of my mind, saying, "Feed me, feed me, feed me." I tried to ignore it, check my gear, read by headlamp for a while. The hunger never quite went away. I slept poorly that night, not because of any sound or disturbance. The forest was quiet. Too quiet. Actually, now that I thought about it, I hadn't heard any owls. No wolf howling. Just wind and creaking trees. I woke up twice in the night, both times thinking about food. The 4th day, the tracks appeared. I was surveying the north shore of the lake, following a wolf trail, when I noticed something else. Another set of prints paralleling the wolf tracks, maybe 50 yards deeper in the trees. I approached carefully, my curiosity overriding my unease. The tracks were huge, easily twice the size of the wolf prints. But the strange thing was how they were spaced. The stride was impossibly long, maybe 7 or 8 feet between prints, and they were perfectly straight, unwavering, not following any logical path through the terrain. They didn't go around obstacles. They went straight through dense brush where anything that size should have left a trail of broken branches. But there were no broken branches. The tracks themselves were odd, deep, as if made by something very heavy. But the shape was wrong. Too elongated, almost like human prints, but stretched, distorted, the toes spread in a way that looked more like long fingers and feet. I followed them for maybe 200 yards. They paralleled the lake shore, then turned suddenly and headed straight into the densest part of the forest, toward a cedar swamp where the trees grew so thick you could barely see 10 feet ahead. I didn't follow them into the swamp. I stood at the edge of that dark tangle of cedars, my breath steaming, and felt something I hadn't felt in years in the wilderness. Fear, not respect for danger, not caution. Fear. The tracks were fresh, made sometime in the night or early morning. Whatever made them was close, maybe watching me right now from somewhere in that darkness. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the swamp until I was a safe distance. Then I turned and walked back to camp faster than I should have, not running. You don't run in the wilderness because running looks like prey, but walking very purposefully. Back at camp, I made myself coffee and tried to think rationally. Large tracks. Could be a moose. Moose have big feet, and in deep snow, tracks can look distorted. The stride length could be explained by an animal leaping or moving through deep drifts. Except moose don't walk in perfectly straight lines. And those weren't moose tracks. Bear? Wrong season. Wrong stride. Wrong shape. Wolverine? Too small, even accounting for distortion. I didn't know what made those tracks. And I was so hungry I could barely think straight. I ate lunch. Then I ate what I'd planned for dinner. Then I ate tomorrow's breakfast. The food barely touched the gnawing emptiness of my gut. This was wrong. This was medically wrong. I was eating thousands of calories and feeling hungrier than when I'd started. I checked my food supplies. I'd been out for 4 days. At my current rate of consumption, I had maybe 10 days of food left. Not enough to last 3 weeks. Not even close. I needed to ration, carefully, but the hunger made it so hard to think about anything else. That night, I heard something moving around my camp. I was in my tent, half asleep, when I heard the crunch of snow. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, circling the tent at a distance of maybe 30 yards. I lay perfectly still listening. My rifle was beside me. My knife was in reach. My hand moved slowly to the gun. The footsteps continued. Crunch, crunch, crunch. Methodical, patient, not trying to be quiet, but not rushing either, just walking in a circle around my camp. I wanted to look outside. Every instinct said to identify the threat, but something deeper, something more primal, told me to stay still, stay hidden. Don't let it know you're awake. The circling continued for maybe 10 minutes. Then it stopped. Silence. I waited, my heart hammering, my breath shallow. Then I heard something else. A sound that made every hair on my body stand up, sniffing. Deep, wet, rattling inhalations right outside the tent wall. Moving slowly from one end of the tent to the other. Smelling me. Learning me. I lay there frozen. The rifle in my hands, my finger on the safety, knowing somehow that shooting through the tent at something I couldn't see would be worse than doing nothing. The sniffing stopped. The footsteps moved away, not hurried, just walking back into the forest. I could hear them for a long time, growing fainter, until they were gone. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat up with my rifle across my knees, the stove burning to keep the tent warm, and I waited for dawn. When light finally came, I unzipped the tent and looked outside. There were tracks everywhere, the same tracks I'd seen by the lake, circling my camp in a perfect ring, maybe 30 yards out, exactly as I'd heard. But in the fresh snow, I could see them clearly now. They weren't animal tracks. They weren't human tracks. They were something in between, something wrong. And leading away from the camp, heading back into the deep forest, they changed. The stride got longer, more ground covered with each step, as if whatever made them had started walking on 2 legs, and then, I don't know, grown taller, started moving faster, stopped being bound by normal physics. The tracks led toward the cedar swamp again. I packed up camp that morning, not to leave. That would require hiking 12 miles through forest that was now occupied by something I didn't understand. But I moved my camp to a different location, farther from the swamp, closer to the lake's open ice where I could see anything approaching. I tried to radio out, but the satellite phone wouldn't connect. I tried 6 times. Nothing, not even static, just dead air. The device was working. The battery was charged. The antenna was deployed. It just wouldn't connect. I felt the first cold touch of real fear settle into my bones. I was alone, cut off, and something was out here with me. That day I tried to work, tried to maintain routine. Routine was control. Routine was sanity. But I couldn't focus on wolf tracks or moose population metrics. I kept scanning the tree line, kept listening for footsteps, and I kept eating. I ate constantly. I couldn't help it. The hunger was overwhelming now, a desperate clawing emptiness that made my hands shake and my thoughts scatter. I went through another 2 days of food. That meant I had maybe a week left. Maybe, that night, I built the fire bigger than necessary, made it a beacon, something to keep the darkness at bay. I sat close to it, feeding it constantly, and I thought about Dale's warning. If you start feeling hungrier than you should, if food stops tasting right, come back early. But I couldn't leave, not in the dark, not with that thing out there. I'd have to wait until morning. Pack up, hike fast, get out while I still had strength. Just one more night. I must have dozed off sitting up, because I woke suddenly to find the fire had burned down the coals, and something was standing at the edge of my camp. I could see it in the dim red glow of the embers. It was tall, impossibly tall, 8 feet, maybe 9, skeletal. Its limbs were too long, joints bending at angles that weren't quite right. Its skin was gray-white, stretched over bones that showed through like a relief map. Its hands reached almost to its knees, and the fingers were so long they looked like bare tree branches. But it was a head that froze me. The skull was elongated, deer-like, but wrong. The antlers were massive, spreading out and up, but some of the tines were broken, and others looked like they'd grown through the skull itself. The eyes were sunken black pits. The mouth was open, and I could see rows of teeth that were too long, too sharp, set in jaws that looked strong enough to crack bones like kindling. It stood there watching me, not moving, just watching with those hollow eyes. And I heard it, not with my ears. In my head, a voice that was like wind through dead trees, like ice cracking on a frozen lake. Hungry. The word echoed in my skull. So, hungry. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. My hand was on the rifle, but I couldn't make my fingers work. It took a step closer, then another, moving with a strange, gliding gait that didn't match its skeletal frame. You feel it too, don't you? Not a question, a statement of fact. The hunger, always the hunger. Never enough, never satisfied. Another step. I smelled it on you. The moment you entered my forest. The emptiness, the wanting. It was maybe 15 feet away now. Close enough that I could smell it. Rotten meat, frozen decay, starvation made physical. I could make it stop, it said. The hunger, I could feel you. Its mouth opened wider, impossibly wide, and I saw deeper into that throat lined with teeth. All you have to do is feed. My hand was shaking. My whole body was shaking. But somehow, some part of my brain still worked. I threw the coffee pot into the coals. Sparks and ash exploded upward. The thing flinched back. Just for a second, that second was enough. I grabbed a burning branch in the fire and swung it toward the creature, yelling, roaring, making myself as loud and threatening as I could. It stepped back, then back again, but it wasn't afraid. It was amused. I could feel its amusement, like cold water down my spine. Not yet, it said, but soon, when you're weak, when the hunger is all you are, when you understand that there's only one way to make it stop. It turned and walked back into the forest, not hurried, not concerned, just patient. I kept the fire huge for the rest of the night, used up half my remaining fuel, sat with my rifle and my knife and my bear spray and every light I had, and I waited for dawn. My mind kept circling back to what it had said. I could make it stop. All you have to do is feed. What did that mean? Feed on what? I was afraid I knew. As soon as there was enough light to see, I began packing, hands shaking so badly I could barely work the buckles. I was leaving. Immediately. Forget the survey. Forget professionalism. I was getting out. I broke camp in maybe 30 minutes. Left half my gear. Just took the essentials. Food, water, shelter, weapons. Started hiking back the way I'd come. The forest was silent. No birds. No squirrels. Nothing. Just my footsteps crunching in the snow and my breath rasping in the cold air. I'd hiked maybe 2 miles when I realized something was wrong. The trail wasn't where it should be. I was navigating by compass, following my GPS coordinates exactly, but the forest didn't look right. The landmarks I'd noted on the way weren't there. Or they were in the wrong places. I stopped, checked the GPS again. The coordinates said I was right on track, but the terrain was wrong. I kept hiking, faster now, pushing hard despite the hunger gnawing at my insides. Another mile, 2 miles. I should have reached the frozen stream where I'd camped on the first night. It wasn't there. I checked the GPS. It showed me right on top of the stream location, but there was no stream, just unbroken forest. Panic started crawling up my throat. I forced it down. Stay calm. Stay rational. Maybe the GPS was glitching. Maybe I'd gotten turned around somehow. I checked my compass. Pointed north. Spun in a circle. Still pointed north. No. Wait. I held it still and watched. The needle was moving. Slowly. Rotating clockwise with steady, deliberate motion. Not spinning wildly like it would near a magnetic anomaly. Just turning. Smoothly. As if north itself was circling around me. That's when I heard it behind me. Footsteps. That same measured crunch in the snow. Following. I started running. You don't run in the wilderness. Running is prey behavior. Running attracts predators. Running makes you look weak. I ran anyway. I crashed through brush, leaped over fallen logs, slid down slopes, hauled myself up hills, moving as fast as I could with a heavy pack and exhausted legs. The footsteps followed. Never faster, never slower, just maintaining the same distance. It was hurting me. I realized this after maybe 20 minutes of blind flight. It was keeping me moving in a specific direction. Every time I tried to veer left or right, I'd hear movement in that direction, cutting me off, forcing me to adjust course. It was driving me deeper into the forest. I stopped finally, too exhausted to continue, my lungs burning, my legs shaking. I unslung my rifle, chamber round, and turned to face whatever was behind me. Nothing, just trees and snow and silence. But I could feel it watching. What do you want? I screamed into the forest. My voice echoed and died. Then, from multiple directions at once, that voice in my head, I want you to understand. I spun, trying to locate the source. North, south, east, west. It was everywhere. You came in my forest. You carry that emptiness inside you, the hunger that never stops, the wanting that never fills. I'm leaving, I shouted. I'm getting out of here. Laughter, cold and dry as wind over ice. There is no leaving. Not until you understand. Not until you're ready. Ready for what? To feed. The forest went silent again. I stood there, rifle raised, spinning in slow circles, and I realized I had no idea which direction I'd come from. The GPS was useless. The compass was worse than useless. I was lost. Truly, completely lost. The rational part of my brain, the part that kept me alive through countless wilderness expeditions, tried to assert control. You're not lost. You have skills. You know how to navigate. Find a high point. Look for landmarks. Stay calm. But the fear was louder. And under the fear, growing stronger every second, was the hunger. I was so hungry I could barely think. I found myself looking at the trees around me and thinking about the inner bark. It's edible, the cambium layer. I'd eaten it before in survival training. It tastes like wet cardboard, but it's food. I was actually considering it when I realized what I was doing. I had food in my pack. Maybe a week's worth if I rationed carefully. There was no reason to start eating tree bark. Except I couldn't stop thinking about it. I forced myself to sit down, rest, drink water, eat a protein bar. The bar tasted like nothing, like I was chewing paper. I could feel it in my mouth, feel myself swallowing, but there was no satisfaction, no sense of nourishment, just emptiness. I ate another bar. Same thing. I ate 3 more. Nothing. The hunger was worse now. Not physical pain, but something deeper. A hollowness that went beyond my stomach, beyond my body. It felt existential, like I was missing some essential piece of myself, and food was just a poor substitute for what I really needed. What did I really need? The question whispered through my mind, and I didn't like where it was going. I pulled out my map. Useless now, since I didn't know where I was, but I studied it anyway, looking for anything that might help. My eyes kept drifting to the blank spaces between marked features. Unnamed lakes, uncharted ridges, places where the topographic lines got confused and unclear. There was a lot of blank space on this map. I was somewhere in that blankness now. I decided to try the satellite phone again. It had been useless before, but maybe whatever was interfering had limits. Maybe if I got to higher ground. I climbed a nearby ridge, slipping and scrambling in the snow until I reached the top, deployed the antenna, pointed it south where the satellites would be, turned on the phone. Static, just static. I tried for 10 minutes. Nothing. I was about to give up when I heard something in the static. Not quite a voice, more like breathing, slow, rattling, wet. Then words formed in the noise. No one is coming. I threw the phone into the snow. That's when I noticed what was around me. Bones. The ridge was covered with them, half buried in snow, scattered among the trees. Ribs, femurs, skulls. Some looked like deer or moose. Others were smaller. Rabbits, maybe. Foxes. Some were larger. I brushed snow off one of the large skulls, and my breath caught. Human. The skull was human, and it wasn't old. Tissue still clung to some of the bone, hair frozen in the snow nearby. I scrambled back, nearly falling, and saw more. 3 human skeletons, maybe 4, scattered across the ridge like they'd been laid out for display. All of them had been broken open, ribs snapped, long bones cracked, skulls crushed and split. Everything had been opened to get at what was inside. Marrow, brains, organs. Someone had fed here. Something. I ran back down the ridge, not caring about the noise, not caring about anything except getting away from those bones. I crashed through the forest, branches tearing at my clothes and face, until I couldn't run anymore. I collapsed in the snow, gasping, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my ribs. How long had those people been out here? How long had they lasted before? Before what? Before they died? Or before they became something else? I thought about what the thing had said. I could make it stop. All you have to do is feed. No. I wasn't going to think about that. I was getting out. I was surviving. I'd survived worse than this. Except I hadn't. I'd never faced anything like this. Bears I could understand. Wolves I could deal with. Exposure, injury, getting lost. All manageable problems with known solutions. But this thing, this Wendigo, because that's what it was, I could admit that now. This wasn't a survival problem. This was something else entirely. I checked my remaining food. 4 days left. Maybe 5 if I really stretched it. Not enough. Unless I rationed severely. Unless I found other food sources. I could trap rabbits. Set snares. It would take time, but it was possible. Or I could... No. I had to stop these thoughts. I had to focus. I found a defensible position. A small clearing surrounded by dense brush with a large boulder at my back. Set up camp. Built a fire. Made myself eat dinner even though I knew it wouldn't help. Night came fast. The forest grew dark and the temperature dropped. I sat by the fire, rifle across my knees, and I waited. The footsteps started around midnight. Circling again. Closer this time. Maybe 20 yards out. Moving in a slow, steady pattern around my camp. I could see movement between the trees. A shadow darker than the others. Tall. Impossibly tall. It didn't try to hide now. It walked into the firelight. The Wendigo stood at the edge of my camp, its skeletal frame painted in flickering orange light, its antlers casting twisted shadows, and it looked at me with those empty eyes. "You're weakening," it said in my head. "I can smell it. The hunger is eating you from the inside." "Stay back," I said, raising the rifle. It tilted its head, amused. "What will you shoot?" "I am already dead. I have been dead for longer than your people have names. I am hunger itself. You cannot kill hunger. What do you want from me?" "I want you to stop fighting. Fighting only makes it worse. The hunger will never stop. Not through denial, not through willpower, only through feeding." "I'm not eating people." The thing's mouth stretched in something like a smile, showing all those teeth. "Not yet, but you will. When the hunger gets bad enough. When you're so empty, you can't remember what it feels like to be full. When you look at your own hand and wonder what it would taste like. That won't happen. It always happens. Do you think you're special? Do you think you're stronger than all the others who ended up here? All those bones on the ridge. They all said the same thing. They all fought. They all resisted. It leaned closer, and I could smell it now, that overwhelming stench of rot and starvation. But in the end, they all fed, and then they understood. Then they were free from a hunger that had haunted them their entire lives. Because the hunger isn't about food, Marcus. It never was. What is it about? Emptiness. The hole inside you that you try to fill with work, with wilderness, with isolation. Running from people because people hurt you. Running from connection because connection means risk. You've been hungry your whole life. You just didn't know what you were hungry for. The words hit harder than they should have, because they were true. Part of them was true. I had been running from my ex-wife, from my daughter, who I barely knew how to talk to anymore, from everyone. The forest had been my escape, my place where I didn't have to deal with the messiness of being human. But that didn't mean this thing was right. That didn't mean the answer was to become a monster. No, I said, you're lying. You're trying to manipulate me. I'm showing you the truth. The truth you already know. You're more like me than you want to admit. Empty, hungry, alone. It reached out one of those impossibly long hands, fingers extending toward me. Join me, feed, become what you already are. I pulled the trigger. The gunshot was deafening in the still night. The bullet hit the Wendigo center mass, right where its heart should have been. The impact drove it back a step. I saw the entry wound, saw the exit wound, saw clear through to the trees behind it. It looked down at the hole in its chest. Then it looked back at me and laughed. Foolish. It took a step forward. Then another, moving toward me despite the wound that should have dropped any living thing. I fired again. Headshot. Perfect placement. The bullet took off half its skull. It kept coming. I fired 3 more times. Chest. Neck, leg, every shot hit. Every shot did nothing. The rifle clicked empty. The Wendigo stood 5 feet away, riddled with bullets, pieces of skull and brain matter hanging from its ruined head, and it reached for me. I grabbed a burning branch from the fire and swung it at that reaching hand. The flames touched its skin and the creature shrieked, a sound like sheet metal tearing, and it jerked back, clutching at hand. Fire. It didn't like fire. I held the burning branch between us, waving it, forcing it back. That won't last forever, it hissed. Fire burns out. Food runs out. Strength runs out. But I am patient. I will wait. And when you're weak enough, when you're desperate enough, you'll call for me. They always do. And I will come, and I will teach you how to feed. It backed into the darkness, and I heard it moving away through the forest, that steady crunch of footsteps fading into the distance. I stood there shaking, the burning branch in my hands, and I understood something terrible. It was telling the truth. I couldn't kill it. I couldn't escape it. And eventually I would run out of food, out of strength, out of options, unless I found another way. I spent the rest of that night feeding the fire and thinking, really thinking. For the first time since I'd entered this forest, the Wendigo had said I was like it. Empty, hungry, alone. Was that true? Maybe it was. I'd spent so much of my life avoiding connection, avoiding vulnerability, hiding in the wilderness because it was simpler than dealing with people. My marriage had failed because I'd chosen the forest over my wife. My relationship with my daughter was distant because I didn't know how to be close. I'd been running from hunger all along, just not the kind of hunger I'd thought. But that didn't mean the Wendigo's answer was right. There had to be another way. I thought about Dale's warning, about his grandfather's stories, about the tobacco and sage he'd given me, still tucked in my pack, old remedies for old problems. I pulled out the cloth bundle and unwrapped it. Tobacco and sage, dried and fragrant even in the cold. I built up the fire and added the herbs. They caught and smoked, filling the air with a sharp, clean scent. I didn't know if this would work. I didn't know if I believed it could work. But I sat in that smoke, and I thought about everything the Wendigo had said. And I made a choice. I wasn't going to feed. I wasn't going to become like it. But I also wasn't going to keep running from the real hunger, the human need for connection, for family, for something more than just survival. If I got out of here, if I survived, I was going to call my daughter. I was going to try, really try. That was my promise to myself. Sitting in sage smoke in a cursed forest. Maybe it sounds stupid. Maybe it sounds like the ramblings of someone breaking down. But making that promise changed something. I felt it shift inside me. The horrible gnawing hunger didn't disappear, but it changed, became more manageable, more human. The smoke drifted to the forest, and for the first time in days, I felt like maybe I could survive this. The next few days blurred together. I stayed in that camp, in that defensible position. I set snares and caught 2 rabbits. I boiled bark and forced myself to eat it. I rationed my remaining food down to bare minimum calories. The hunger was still there, constant, overwhelming, but I didn't let it control me. The Wendigo came every night. Sometimes it spoke. Sometimes it just watched from the darkness beyond the firelight. Sometimes I'd hear it moving in the forest during the day, paralleling my movements if I had to leave camp for any reason. But it didn't attack again. It was waiting for me to weaken, waiting for me to break. I didn't break. On the 7th day after my decision, I woke to find the forest had changed. I could hear birds. Not many, but some. A whiskey jack called from a nearby tree. I heard a red squirrel chattering. The oppressive silence had lifted slightly. I checked my compass. It was pointing steadily north, not spinning, not glitching. North. I didn't question it. I just started walking. The forest seemed less dense now, less hostile. I recognized landmarks. That fallen pine, that distinctive boulder. I knew where I was. I was maybe 5 miles from where I'd entered the forest. I walked all day, pushing hard, ignoring the hunger, ignoring my exhaustion. As sunset approached, I reached the logging trail where Jesse had dropped me off weeks ago. I stood on that trail, looking back into the forest, and I heard footsteps behind me one last time. I turned. The Wendigo stood at the forest edge, half hidden in shadows. It looked different somehow. Smaller, less substantial. You won't escape it, it said. The hunger follows. Even if you leave this forest, even if you return to your people, you'll feel it, late at night, when you're alone, that emptiness, that wanting, and you'll remember what I offered. Maybe, I said, but I won't take it. We'll see. It turned and walked back into the forest. I watched until it disappeared. Then I started walking out. I hiked through the night, following the logging trail by moonlight, partly because I didn't want to spend another night in that forest, partly because I knew if I stopped, if I let myself rest, I might not get up again. I reached Vermilion Crossing just after dawn. Dale was opening up the outfitter station when I stumbled in, half frozen, half starved, but alive. He took one look at me, and his face went very still. You saw it, he said. Not a question. I nodded. He helped me inside. Made coffee. Didn't ask questions. Just let me warm up and eat and slowly return to being human. Finally, he said, my grandfather told me that some people come back from those places. Not many, but some. He said they're marked, though. Said the hunger never completely leaves them. He was right, I said. Dale nodded slowly. But you came back. That's something. Most people who go that deep, who see what you saw, they don't come back at all, or they come back wrong. I almost didn't come back. I admitted it wanted me to change, to become like it. But you didn't. No. Why not? I thought about that, about the choice I'd made in the smoke and firelight, because I realized the hunger isn't the problem. The emptiness isn't the problem. Being afraid of connection, of people, of being hurt. That's the problem. And you can't fix that by eating the world. You can only fix it by trying, by being willing to be human, even when it's hard. Dale looked at me for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and gripped my shoulder. You're a wise man, Marcus. Wiser than you know. I stayed in Vermilion Crossing for 2 days, eating real food that still didn't quite satisfy, but was better than nothing. Sleeping in a real bed, though the dreams were bad. Calling my daughter and actually talking to her, really talking for the first time in months. She was surprised to hear from me. Surprised I wanted to talk. I told her I'd been thinking about her, that I'd been gone too much, that I wanted to do better. She didn't say much. The hurt was still there. The distance was still there. But she didn't hang up. And at the end of the call, she said, "Maybe we could get dinner sometime when you're back in town." "I'd like that," I said. It wasn't much, but it was a start. I filed my report with the Forest Service, called it an equipment malfunction, an early termination survey, due to extreme weather conditions. They accepted it without question. I'd built up enough credibility over 18 years that no one doubted me. I didn't mention the Wendigo. What would I say? That I'd been stalked by a mythological creature that fed on human hunger and offered me a chance to become a monster? They'd think I'd had a mental breakdown. Maybe I did. I returned to Duluth, returned to my apartment, tried to resume normal life. But Dale's grandfather was right. The hunger follows. It's been 3 months now. 3 months since I left that forest, and I still feel it. Not as intense as it was out there. Not that overwhelming, all-consuming emptiness. But it's there, a background presence. A whisper in the back of my mind. Food doesn't taste quite right. Nothing is ever quite satisfying. And sometimes, late at night when I'm alone, I feel that presence. Watching, waiting. I've started doing things differently. I call my daughter every week now. We've had dinner 3 times. It's awkward. There's a lot of healing to do. But we're trying. I've reached out to old friends. Accepted invitations I would have declined before. Forced myself to be part of the world instead of hiding from it. It helps. Connection helps. Being present with people, even when it's uncomfortable, seems to quiet that voice. But it never goes away completely. Sometimes I dream about the forest, about those tracks in the snow, about that skeletal figure standing at the edge of firelight. And in those dreams, it speaks to me. I'm still here, still waiting. When you're ready, when you understand, I'll be here. I wake up hungry. I tell you this now because you need to understand something. The Wendigo isn't just a monster in a forest. It's a representation of something deeper, something that exists in all of us. That emptiness, that hunger that can never be filled by food or work or success or anything external. We all feel it. That sense that something is missing, that we're incomplete somehow. And there are always voices offering to fill that emptiness, offering easy answers, telling us that if we just consume enough, take enough, feed enough, we'll finally be satisfied. But that path leads to becoming something less than human, something that exists only to consume, to take, to feed. The real answer is harder. It means being vulnerable, being willing to connect even when it hurts, being willing to need people and let people need you. It means accepting that the hunger is part of being human, and that's okay. We're not supposed to be complete. We're supposed to need each other. I'm still learning that lesson, still fighting that hunger every day. But I'm fighting it, and I'm not alone anymore. That's what saved me. Not strength, not survival skills, not fire or weapons, or any of the tools I brought into that forest. Connection saved me. The promise of it, the possibility of it, the choice to reach for it instead of retreating into isolation. And now I'm telling you this story, and maybe that was a mistake, because stories feed it. The Wendigo grows stronger when people know about it. When people think about it, when people feel that recognition deep in their gut. You feel it, don't you? That hunger I've been describing. You know what I'm talking about. We all do. So maybe by listening to this, by really hearing what I'm saying, you've opened that door in your mind, the one that won't quite close, the one that lets the hunger in. I hope not. I hope you're stronger than that. I hope you have people around you, people you can talk to, people who fill that emptiness with something real. But if you don't, if you're alone right now, listening to this in the dark, if you're feeling that gnawing emptiness in your chest that has nothing to do with whether you've eaten recently, be careful. The forest is bigger than you think. It's not just trees and snow. It's anywhere you can get lost, anywhere you can be alone, anywhere the hunger can find you, and it's always looking. I still go into the wilderness for work. I can't quite give it up completely. It's part of who I am, but I'm more careful now. I don't go alone. I don't stay as long. And I never, ever go back to that particular forest. Some places should remain unmarked on maps. Some territories should stay unincorporated. Some hungers should remain unfed. I hope you understand what I'm telling you. I hope you make the right choice. But if you don't, if you find yourself in a forest or a city or your own home, feeling that overwhelming emptiness, if you hear footsteps that match your own pace, if you start feeling hungrier than you should, remember what I learned. You can't fight it with strength alone. You can't survive it through isolation. You can only survive it by being willing to be human, by reaching out, by connecting, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. The hunger wants you to be alone. It wants you to think you're the only one who feels this way. It wants you to believe that feeding is the only answer. Don't listen. Call someone. Talk to someone. Be with someone. The hunger loses its power when you're not alone. That's the secret. That's what it doesn't want you to know. And maybe that's why I told you the story. Not to spread its influence, but to give you the antidote. Connection is the answer, not consumption. Remember that. Please, I need to go now. My daughter is coming over for dinner. It's our 4th meal together. We're making progress. Slowly. And I'm hungry, but it's a human hunger now. One that can be satisfied, at least for a while. I hope the same is true for you. I hope you find what you're looking for. Just don't look for it in the forest. Not that forest. Some places remember. Some things wait. And hunger is patient. It has all the time in the world.